Is this thing live yet? Are we live? Yeah, all right, we're live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Shift the Journey. I'm your host. My name is Tito Amogus. If you don't know me, that's who I am. This is what is Shift the Journey? Well, we're on episode 19 for one. So this is a careers podcast. I guess I would say it's a careers podcast. Really, it's about a career journey. So some of us may have started out in a different career field than what we're in right now. And so I really want to get out the information to anybody who's thinking about a career change or who's got perhaps a calling on your life and you just haven't answered it yet. And one of the things that I really love to do is like to connect people or to even just give people some encouragement on the fact that you can make changes in your careers and there are resources and there are people there to help you. And so every week I like to interview a different person and they get to talk about, where they're from, what they did before, what they're doing now, and things like that. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest today. His name is Michael Burkes. Michael is one of my four brothers-in-law. He is one of the three Michaels. I know if you watched the episode 11 with Michael Prevey, you would know that I have four brothers-in-law and three of them are named Michael. And so this one is my wife's middle brother. And so Michael is, well, we can get into his career. Let's start with, first off, why don't you tell everybody where you're originally from? No, a little bit of lagging happening. Michael, can you hear me?
It's freezing up real.
Can you hear me? Oh man. Yeah, so can you oh no. We got some internet issues here. Hang on. Hey, are you there? It's so weird. I could hear dogs barking.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you
All
see it
right.
now?
Yeah.
I switched over
Yeah,
to
yeah.
my iPhone, so hopefully that'll
Yeah.
where I hotspotted to my iPhone, so hopefully that'll work better.
Yeah. All right. So where is it? Can you tell everybody where you're from originally?
Well, originally I'm from back home, Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. But um, we moved up. We've moved all over the place. Obviously, Oklahoma, Germany, Colorado, then here in Louisiana, and right now I reside in DeRidder, Louisiana, is where I'm currently located at. So.
Yeah. So the reason why the family moved around is because his dad was in the army. And so what was that like growing up, going to all those different schools in a bunch of different places? Did you have an easy time connected with people or did you have a tough time?
Um, I, it was fairly easy to me. I've always had an outgoing personality. Never, I was never shy or anything like that. Wherever I was gonna go, you were either gonna like me or don't like me. But so I was looking for friends, and I was gonna find where I fit in. I didn't have a clique or nothing that I belonged to. I didn't dress a certain way or didn't act a certain
Hmm.
way. I was pretty much myself, and and I had a diverse group of friends everywhere I went. The but yeah, it was. I would say it was fairly easy transition for me. It wasn't fun. I will say that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
by the time you get really good friends or whatever, you'd move on somewhere something like that. So, but
Hmm.
luckily, we moved here to Leesville back in '91. We were all able to finish school here. High school. And everything. So that kind of became home for most of, or for myself, as I married a local girl. So.
Yeah. So you started out your like your working life, I guess you could say, like your adult working life in the army. What were like your motivations to join the army, other than your dad being in the army? Was there
Yeah.
anything else?
Well, my biggest thing is, I was in college, going to school for, uh, it was what they called industrial technologies back then. It was basically like draftsmanship and stuff like that, to draft, do architectural drafting and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And but I was engaged with Christy, and I knew I wanted to get married. And I was working at McDonald's. I was working on Fort Polk installing air conditioning units. I was working at a junkyard, stripping cars, loading parts, or doing whatever I can. So I had like three jobs going and trying to survive, and go to college at
Yeah,
night. And so it was. I knew I wanted to get married, and there was no way that I was going to make a sustain a life, going to school and doing all this other stuff that I had to do, or that I was doing, and be able to, to take care of my wife. So it was on a whim one night working McDonald's. Actually, one night, it was one morning. I got up mad with one of our managers, walked out, and took break, walked over to the recruiting station next door, joined the army, come out. That was
you
my.
serious? Man, I've
Yeah.
never heard that story before. What? That's crazy. That's nuts, man. So, like, when you joined, were you able to choose a career field, MOS, right? Were you?
Uh, once I signed up and everything, told them I was going to do it. They gave me opportunity to come home and talk to Dad and all that stuff and everything. And Dad told me
Mhm.
that he said I either need to go in medical or aviation, and
Yeah,
so I went there, and based on my ASVAB scores and all that stuff and everything, I qualified for either one, but I just didn't see myself in the medical field at the
yeah,
time, and so I like mechanicking and everything, so I chose aviation, and the MEPS tried to get one over on me when I first went there. They tried to stick me in communications, and I called Dad at the MEP station, and the guy at the E7 was yelling at me, and so I called Dad because he wouldn't tell me what a 31 uniform was,
yeah.
and the guy was yelling at me and everything. And I told him, I said, "Look, man, I said, I ain't in the army yet." I said, "You can't, you can yell all you want." And I said, "I ain't doing nothing. I'll get up, walk out of this place." The And so I called Dad, and Dad's like, "You don't want that." He said, "You'll be running telephone wire in the field." He said, "That's
Mm.
pretty much your job will be." And so I told him I walked back in there. I said, "I don't take it," and it was crazy because during that time when I went over there for that, it was the biggest freeze in Shreveport, Bossier City area. That at the time, the whole town was shut down, and I'm stuck there. And so my recruiter, we went to church with him, John Bergman. He had to drive, had to weasel his way back into Shreveport to come pick me up because all the main roads were shut down and everything. And
Whoa.
and then the second time I went back is when I actually got the job that I was looking for, and I would become a 67 uniform a Chinook helicopter mechanic.
Wow. So, man, that's nuts. There's already a bunch of twists and turns before you get there, right? It's
Hmm.
interesting. So, so where did you go for training when you started?
Went to Jackson for basic training, then went from Jackson to Fort Eustis, Virginia. And
Oh,
I did
really?
Fort Eustis. Yeah, I did Fort Eustis for I think I was there for like 4.5, almost 5 months. That I
Mm,
was there for training. Um, I know I left there in February '97, and I think I got there in August. No,
mhm.
August, September. I think something like that of '96. So it was a pretty extensive training, for school that I had to go through, and it's a 8-year enlistment, from the get go, or I'm sorry,
Oh,
the 6-year enlistment. The my eight
okay,
year
yeah.
standard commitment, but it was a 6-year enlistment. So I knew that I was going to be going to school for a long time, because it's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And so I went in and did my training there at Fort Eustis and everything, and end up getting selected from my class to go to the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. It was supposed to be a volunteer unit, and when I got my orders,
Mhm.
I went to my drill sergeant and I said, "Hey, I think they messed up." And they were like, "Why?" And I said, "Because this is a volunteer unit. I didn't volunteer for it." And they said, we know, but we volunteered you for it. And I said,
Oh.
oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. And they're like, yeah. They said, but if you don't like it, you can, when you get there, you have to do an assessment and everything. And, if you don't want to do it or whatever, then you'll have an avenue out from that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there I went from Fort Eustis, Virginia back to Savannah, Georgia at Hunter
Right.
Armory Airfield. So,
yeah. So yeah, we met in Savannah. I remember you showed me the Chinook, and I was like surprised because you were talking about like the different responsibilities that you had working on the aircraft. And for me, I was working on JSTARS, which is a surveillance platform built on a Boeing 707. And as a comm nav guy, all I ever touched were radios and radar, right? But you had responsibility over a whole bunch of stuff, which in the Air Force would be a bunch of different specialties, right?
right. Yeah, we were trained and qualified to work on all systems because technically my job description was a medium helicopter repairer. And it was one of the only jobs in the military at the time. And in fact, I think they changed it. It's no longer a medium helicopter repair. I think they actually call it a Chinook helicopter repair now.
Mhm.
But we were considered because we had it used all systems, every system that in aviation it was on the Chinook, and so we had to have a working knowledge on all of it. Now we weren't specialty in everything, but we had to be able to fix and work on everything.
Mhm. Wow. So what was it like getting to getting acclimated to your first, unit? Were you already married by that time?
hmm I went home. I actually went home during Christmas break of '96 in AIT, and we got married in December of '96. Came home. I came home on like the 22nd or 23rd.
Mhm.
Got married on the 28th and left out back to on the first or second. Left and went back to school. Finished a month and graduated February '97. So.
Wow. Yeah. So how long were you at your first base before you got sent somewhere?
The like as far as like being deployed
Yeah.
or the
Deployed or TDY, either one.
right 4 months, the
Yeah.
3.5 4 months. My first training or went there that I went to was actually in we went down to Panama in Central America. We worked down there. Then we flew down into Ecuador and did joint missions, moving the Ecuadorian army from one mount site to another mount site, working with the SF guys and stuff down there and everything.
Mhm. So, was there a point that while you were in, did you think like, "Oh yeah, I could make a career of this," or like, "Man, I got to get out of here"?
Um, at first, it was something I didn't. It wasn't something I was pursuing a career. Because I just was looking for a time. I was looking. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be an architect,
Mm,
and so that was my avenue is that I could go to school while in the army, get my engineering degree, and then when I got out of the army, then I could go become an engineer and go do what I enjoy doing. I love the design aspect of architectural engineering. And anyways, but once I got in the unit, I had to assess, I made it and everything, and I just the brotherhood that came with that. Obviously, I tell people I don't miss being in the military, but I just miss all my friends. The brotherhood
mm,
that I had, with
yeah,
these guys. I mean, we were, as many times as we were deployed, I spent more time with them than my own family. And
yeah,
so that was the toughest part is leaving then. But I couldn't. I don't even remember all the countries we've been to and the deployments we made. I mean, it was just astronomical. I mean, I'd come home for a couple of weeks or a month, and then we get sent somewhere else, and we go there for 2, 3, 4 weeks, or a couple months or whatever, and just come back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The Christy was a trooper. She raised our girls pretty much on her own, because being
mhm,
that first 7 years that I was in, I stayed deployed. And actually got stop lost. I guess I say 7, but I was supposed to get out in 2002, in July of 2002. 9/11 happened, and then I got stop lost. So I had to stay in an extra year. And at the time when I got stop lost, my new
Oh,
ETS date,
that's right.
my new ETS date was December 31st, 2031.
Oh,
When after 9/11 happened, and so then
man,
Congress passed a law saying that they couldn't keep us in any longer than a year past our original ETS date.
that's good because man, you would have still been in. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah, I was gone a lot too, but not a lot like that. Like I would
Right.
be gone for a few months and then I come home for a few months, maybe 6 months, and then go somewhere again. But yeah, I think one thing that I've seen in like conversations and stuff, like online and forums and stuff, people are asking. Uh, I remember I was looking at this one that was specific to what I did in my last job. My last two jobs was consulting, and there was somebody who said, oh yeah, I'm looking at a huge bonus and a huge raise, but I'm going to be working like 60, 80 hours a week, and I have, small kids. Should I do it? And there were people who were like, yeah, your kids won't remember, and you should do it, this and that. And I couldn't help myself, and I went on there and I said, you know, um, there's one thing that I wish I could get back, and I cannot get back. It's the time when my kids were little. I missed that, and that was rough.
Right.
So I feel for you. I empathize with you.
Right.
So, what were your plans when you decided you were going to get out? When you finally hit your ETS?
Finally, after reaching my stop loss date, my hopes was, in fact, I'd already had a job locked in 2002. I was coming back here to Fort Polk and crew the Hind and the Hip, the Russian aircraft that the that the Army has to help in training the Op 4 here at Fort Polk. They call it
Mhm.
Fort Johnson now. I think that's what they call it now. But anyways, so I was coming back here to do that, and then they tried to hold the position as long as they could, and they couldn't hold it anymore, so they had to fill the position. So I lost that job.
Mm.
Uh, Long story short, a mutual friend of ours that was friends with Christy's family helped get me a job out at Lockheed Martin on Fort Polk,
Mhm.
and so he knew the site supervisor, linked me up, and everything. Met that next day, had lunch with him, talked to him and everything. They offered me a job, told me that they would send me a packet in the mail when I got back to Savannah. So they sent me there. And on top of that, I didn't know what that meant when they said they're going to offer me, make me an offer.
Mm.
I was just looking, I didn't care how much I made. I was just looking, I just had to make something, to
Right.
get out.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, so they send me an offer and everything, and I accept the offer and everything. And then on top of that, they tell me that they're going to pay me to move from Savannah. And I'm like, well, I'm already moving from Savannah to home, and military's moving me. And they're like, well, we know, but we're going to pay you also. And so I was like, okay. Well, how I was moving from Savannah was still going to end up costing me a little bit over almost $3,000 out of my pocket for us to move everything.
Mhm.
And it ended up Lockheed Martin ended up covering the cost down to the penny, what it
Wow.
cost me to move back home. And so that was our first sign that we were in God's will, that we were
Yeah.
moving, that He took care of us. We prayed for that to happen, that if it be His
Yeah.
will, that doors would be open for us and everything. But if it wasn't, because we'd already contemplated me re-enlisting. In fact, when my sergeant major came to me when he heard that I was considering re-enlisting, and he told me, he said, "I'm just going to be 100% honest with you." He said, "You're too valuable to me for me to lose you." He said, "But I can't stop you from getting out of the Army." He said, "But if you re-enlist," he said, "and what you want to do is a 4-year enlistment." He said, "I don't have to send you to your duty station to your last year." And he said, "And I'm just going to be 100% honest with you." He said, "If you re-enlist, you won't go there till then." He said, "I can't afford to lose you." And he said,
Oof.
"But I can't stop you from getting out." And I appreciated his honesty. I mean,
Mhm.
I'd known him since he was at E7, so I felt and he knew Christy and the kids and stuff. And that was the good thing about the unit I was in, is that we were all family. They
Yeah.
they all knew our families. And so
Yeah.
but anyway, so come back here, moved back home, um, and started working out there at Lockheed Martin and everything. I worked there for, I think, about 4, almost 5 years.
What were
Um,
you doing over there?
Working on over there. While I was in, I ended up getting my AMP license,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
and so I had my AMP license, but working for the military, I didn't have to have an AMP. My military experience, uh,
Right.
working civilian side, so that was enough. I didn't have to have my AMP. But anyways, and so I was working on Hueys, Blackhawks, Kiowas, 58s, in Apaches, any aircraft that came to Fort Polk. We
Hmm.
were able to, like, if something broke in the field, we would go out in the field and fix it, or whatever the case may be. So just like contract labor, is what
Yeah.
it was. Worked on all kind of different things.
Yeah.
The but
And then, where did you go after that?
After that, I kind of got tired of the working for too many people, too many bosses, I guess you would say. Nothing
Hmm.
against any of the guys that I worked for, but there were just too many hands in the pot. You have
Right.
the military wanting you to do one thing, then you have the liaison between us and the military want us to do thing, and then our bosses want us to do one thing, and it was just too much, just too much. I feel like I was back in the army again,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want, I was being deployed and sent places and working crazy hours and all that stuff and everything, and so I wanted to work a normal 40-hour week, go home to my wife and my kids, be a dad and a husband and everything, and that's what I want it to be. Um, and so then got kind of tired of that. I chose to seek out choices for me to use my AMP license that I received, and I end up
Hmm.
going down south to Lake Charles and working for Era Helicopters, or some people call them ERA. It's a company out of Alaska, where they originated from, and they moved down
Hmm.
here and they service the Gulf and everything. So I worked down there for about 5 years. Also, the different bases, chasing helicopters, going all over the world again, uh,
Hmm.
inspecting aircraft, receiving brand new aircraft that they bought. I would go and inspect the aircraft, make sure it was airworthy, and pass
Yeah.
its lights and all that stuff and everything. So.
Mm. So, was there a time when you were working for them that you were like, I really need to get out of this aviation industry?
My biggest thing that was like deciding factor is, my PTSD was getting pretty severe. Um,
Mhm.
and that, going to the VA, having no idea. I mean, I knew why I had PTSD, but I didn't know what my triggers were or anything like that. And come to find out
Yeah.
later on, that being in the aviation industry was one of my triggers.
Mm.
I started having a whole lot of memory issues. Couldn't remember working on the aircraft that I worked on. My guys that worked opposite of me would call me and be like, "Hey, Mike, you were working on this aircraft. You did this, this, and this. What else? Is there anything else that we should be trying to do?" And I couldn't even recall working on the aircraft, and I just worked on it 2 days before.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so, and that started to scare me, because I felt, I had a CW4 tell me when I first joined the army. Told me, he said, the day that you think you know everything about this aircraft, or you can't remember what you've done on this aircraft, is that the day you need to quit working on them, because you're going to kill somebody. And I got
Mm.
told that at 19 years old, and
Mhm.
so uh, and it stuck with me. And so after that, in that time frame of being gone, there's a lot of stuff that went on and everything, but I kind of fell away from God and everything, and he kind of reeled me back in, and kind of in being in that position, going to church. Um, Christy and I went through some dark times and
Mhm.
everything, uh, and I started teaching youth at our church, and had 3 kids in my youth group, 4 kids in my youth group, and I started teaching them Sunday schools while I did, long story short, I started doing that and just started growing with them, and I loved it more than I working on helicopters. You know,
Mhm.
I began to see that the service the service that was happening through my youth ministry is what was helping me cope with my PTSD and
Mm.
help through that process, and then triggering finding out all the smells and the sounds and all that stuff of the aviation stuff was causing me a lot of problems, making me angry all the time and everything. Couldn't deal with my anger, so
Mm.
I chose to actually Jackson chose it for me really. And Jackson at 3 years old, he called. I was FaceTiming one day, and he said, "Hey, Dad," he said, "you need to come home." And I said, I said, "I can't come home, man." I said, Dad, Daddy has to work because all the toys and all the stuff that we do and the places we go and the cars we have and the house we have and all that stuff. Daddy
Mhm.
has to work so we can have all those things. And he told me, he said, "We don't need all those things. We need you." You know,
Mhm.
and at 3 years old, he has no idea the
Mm.
truth that he spoken to me. He was my that was God using a 3-year-old kid,
Yeah.
to prove to me, that where my true calling was, and it wasn't in working on helicopters.
Whew, man, that would have wrecked me right there. That's
Mhm.
nuts, man. So, how did you go about trying to make that change? That's a completely different, spectrum. Working on,
Well,
doing
it was
aviation stuff to ministry.
right. It was the year prior. It was kind of work in the works. Um, the the church come to me and seen how everything was going. I answered a call, to the ministry that I felt God was calling me into the ministry, and so I
Yeah.
submitted myself to that, and me and Christy went up there to the church, and said that we felt like this, and our pastor Roger Gill, he was Christy's uncle, he was there with us, and he concurred with me that he felt that this was where I needed to be at, this is my calling and stuff and everything, and so it was kind of in the works, and then around that time frame. Um, uh, the church had started to make moves and suggestions to see if I would consider coming full time to the
Mhm.
ministry. Well, there was no way that they were going to be able to match my salary that I was making chasing helicopters. And so, anyways, and after all that went down with Jackson, uh, I told Christy, I told Christy, I said, I'm gonna put my 2 weeks in, and she was beside herself. I was still I had a construction business on the side that I was doing side jobs here and there to kind of
Mhm.
supplement, when I was home for 2 weeks or whatever, and help get stuff done around our house or buy new tires for our car or whatever, and
Mhm.
uh, and everything. So I knew I had that to fall back on, and so when I told her I was putting my 2-week notice in, she was beside herself. How's that going to work out? The church can only offer us 36,000 at the time. And
Mhm.
you're making triple digits. How in the world how's that math going to work out for us?
Right.
And I don't know. I said, but got to provide. I said, one thing's for sure, we won't lose the house because my disability at the time was enough to pay my house note. You know,
Mhm.
and I said we might not have no electricity, no water, but we'll have a house to sleep in. Something to keep our
Yeah.
head dry. And I knew I could work other places. I knew I could make money. That wasn't an issue
Yeah.
for me. Was it be a lifestyle change? Yes, drastic. You know,
Yeah.
and so, anyways, and so that I transitioned into to youth ministry. Um,
Mhm.
did construction business on the side. It was bivocational, is what my ministry was considered, and
Mhm.
so I did that for um, almost 13 years. That I did bivocational. That did construction work and youth ministry. Probably the last 2 years of my youth ministry, I ended up getting hurt and had to have neck surgery and surgery on my hands and stuff and everything. I just couldn't do the work that I used to do anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and so that kind of pump the brakes. But God took care of all that because in that time frame, the my VA stuff increased. Some things came to for us and everything, and so God took. God always had His hands in it. Since then,
Mhm.
He let us. You know, he got me to 100%. It wasn't permanent total, but it was 100%. And that made up a big chunk of change that I didn't have to work as hard anymore. I didn't have to hustle as much money and jobs and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so and so then that moved us into then COVID and all that stuff hit, and then Christy's uncle, uh, reaching his 30+ year career, deciding to retire,
Hmm.
uh, and then another transition, another detour for me to go through. Uh, was that they asked me to come on uh, as interim senior pastor until we figure out what we're going to do from that point on.
Right.
Then on top of COVID, when all that happened, then we work our way out of COVID. Then we get hit by Hurricane Laura, and
Yep.
Hurricane Laura devastates our neck of the woods and destroys. Caused it was just havoc that it caused us for months. And then come the January after Laura, we had the biggest snow and freeze in the history of Louisiana. That in our area, it was just crazy, the chaos that was all sitting there. You know,
Yeah.
and but God had a plan for it and all that and everything. So you know, he was cleaning the pasture for me. He,
Yeah.
making sure I was ready, that it was ready for me to go out there. So
Yeah. So, um, what was the transition like for you from youth pastor to interim senior pastor?
it was a heck of a road. I will say that. Um, but I never lost faith, and I never lost focus.
Yeah.
I knew God was calling me into the senior pastor role, um, because it wasn't that I couldn't do youth ministry anymore. I think it was mainly because what my biggest hiccup was is that I noticed that I w- the youth were staying the same age, and I was getting older, and so my disconnect was that I didn't find that relation with the younger generation anymore like I did in the past.
Yeah.
Um, and it was and so I didn't know if that meant that I was going to be senior pastor at our church that we were currently attending, or was God going to move somewhere else.
Hmm.
Christian and I both were open to that, you know, to that discussion, and to the, if that's what God wanted us to do, but neither one of us felt like that's what God was moving us to. So
Hmm.
anyway, so we go through the transition, and then the church decides that they want to present me and put me up for a vote, uh, to uh, to become senior pastor. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, the vote didn't go through. I missed it by a
Hmm.
couple of votes, and that caused some havoc. But I quickly jumped in and I said that this isn't how we do things. I'm not gonna allow this um, to destroy, the people in our church and everything. And so
Yeah.
I said, as long as the church is okay with it, I'll step back into my youth ministry role. We'll bring in a transitional guy and from the state convention, and let him work us through what it looks like in the future for us.
Hmm.
And so they were okay with that. They actually sent me on sabbatical for uh, a couple weeks, made me take time off, and so they didn't. And so we stayed away, stayed distant for a while. We still went to church and everything. I just had no responsibility, no roles for that
Hmm.
for a period of time. Came back in, met the transition guy, but his name is Stacy Morgan, Brother Stacy Morgan from the Baptist Convention here in Louisiana. He come in and helped me out tremendously. Met with him. We went through we started the whole process over again, and he wanted to make sure, that that we were doing everything correctly. And he said something to me that helped me. It was him and another guy that was going to church with us, both. The one guy that was going to church with us, he told me, he said the problem is the mold of Brother Roger was never broke, and nobody could
Hmm.
see you in that mold of Brother Roger. And then Brother Stacy, said that, told me that he said your people didn't fail you, your bylaws failed you. He said a
Hmm.
church of your size, there's no way that you would ever that you they can anybody could expect to get 95% of the vote. You know,
Mhm.
take family to flip the vote and decide the whole vote for the entire church. You know, one family.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I'm like, I said, Brother Stacy, I said, I'm here to do whatever you want me to do. I said, but at any time, if you don't think I'm a fit for this, please, you know, I said, I'm a grown man. You know, so you can speak frankly to me and say, hey, look, Mike, I just don't think this is for you. I don't think this church is for you. Blah blah blah. Just tell me. You know, I said, I don't
Mhm.
want to waste time, and I don't want to waste their time. And
Yeah.
so I just plugged in, kept on doing youth ministry stuff, helping Brother Stacy, helping the church, still serving everybody. And so we went through a time of transition with that and everything in a interview process. Um, they come and ask me if I would consider putting my name in the hat again, and I was like, well, as long as Brother Stacy says it's okay for me too, then I will. I said, but I
Mhm.
don't want it to be just my will, you know, just my own
Right.
personal feelings, you know. So, anyways, and Brother Stacy told me, he said, I think it's okay, you know, because they sent it back. They went through many applications again, interviews with people and everything. Um, and so, and then about 6 months later, Brother Stacy come to me and told me, he said, man, he said, I really think this church is a fit for you and you're fit for the church. And,
Mhm.
you know, and he went to the church. He told the church, he said, listen, he said, the good thing about Brother Mike becoming a senior pastor is that you know him. He said, the
Mhm.
bad thing about Brother Mike becoming a pastor here is because you know him. You
Mhm.
know, he said because you cannot know him and be like, oh, you heard him preach one time. You're like, oh man, he's champion. He did a great job. This, that, and another. You hire him,
Yeah.
come in, bring him in, and he's not what you thought he was. He
Yeah.
said, you know who Mike Burkes is, and he said, and I think it'd be a wise fit for you guys.
Mhm.
And so made some changes in our bylaws with the recommendation. The church made the changes to say it wasn't him. He made some suggestions, not just he said the percentage was too high. He said the church our size should be average about 75%, and
Wow.
so he changed it to that and everything. And so spoke with everybody, went through the interview process with the new search team and everything, and they said they agreed, you know, that they wanted me to come and preach for in view of a call. So I went up there and I preached a sermon, and I told the church, you know, I'll stand by with whatever you decide to say, decide that you want or whatever.
Mhm.
And anyway, so they go through and voted again, and that time, um, when the vote went through, I got 97% of the vote at that point in time. And
That's
in fact, I had people come to me and told me, they said, you know, to be honest with you, Mike, they said, I didn't vote for you at first. He said, but what he said, because I couldn't see you not being a youth pastor. You know,
mm.
and he said, but the way you handle yourself, the way you handle the situation, proved to me that you're way more mature than I thought you were, and you're way more professional than I thought you were. And
Wow.
you know, apologize, you know, to me. And I said, no, no apology needed. My prayers are that you were doing what God led you to do. You know, I said, I don't know
Yeah.
why God brought us in this path that we brought us on. I said, but this is how He brought us here. This is how we're going to do it. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's
and that was
it's
3 years
so
ago.
3 years ago, he said?
Mhm,
Yeah. So it's so difficult to change somebody's perception of you, right?
mhm,
And where he had it right was like, oh yeah, you know him, so youth pastor Mike, right? And
mhm,
it's hard to get people to like shift their focus or their perception of like who you've grown to be rather than who they knew you as, right?
yeah,
So that's crazy. So man, thanks for walking us through like your whole journey.
mhm,
It really is amazing. There were some things in there that like the majority of it I knew, right? But there's some things in there I'm like, what? It's like it's really interesting, and it gives me even better perspective on what God's done in your whole life and through you and to you and in you with you and your family, and it
mhm.
just like bolsters my faith as well. about to get emotional. So what are some things that you're involved in right now that are like unique and you're passionate about?
As far as like hobbies, or you just talking about just in general?
Anything,
Yeah.
anything.
Um, I don't know if I mean, I just love serving our community. I love mission work. Love doing going on. I love serving our church. I love working with people. I love mentoring people. I love counseling. I'm very transparent. Sometimes Chrissy tells me I'm too transparent. The um, I by no means am I perfect, and I have made my a lot of mistakes in my life.
Yeah.
Um, but my scars tell my story. You know,
Mm,
they don't define who I was, or they might maybe define who I was, but they don't define who I am today.
mm.
But they did build me to this point. Our fears and
That's a good
failures,
one.
what builds our perseverance and what builds us. And I faced many fears and I faced many failures. But but all I can do is wake up every day being obedient to God, and I just, in fact, I just finished 2 years of going back to college and graduating seminary from
Yeah.
past May. That was a task in itself. Be 47 years old going back to college. The But it's done. So I got my Bachelor of Arts, the something I wanted to do a long time ago, and just finally God, laid it out and made it happen.
Yeah.
And it's happened in His time. So it was great. Learned a lot and everything. So the now it's can breathe a little bit. Um, just just serving, having my family continues to grow. Astronomically.
Yeah. Yep.
Adding in-laws and grandkids into the mix and everything. But I prayed for that for a long time. I always wanted a lot of grandkids and wanted a lot of kids, and I just like people. I just
Mhm.
and God had a better plan than I ever had. You know, He brought many broken people into my family, into my life,
Mhm.
um, that helped build me who I am today. And
Yeah.
those broken people are still family to me. I mean, they still come hang out with us, um, and so it's been a journey by so
Yeah.
far. You're talking about um, making that transition and everything, and the title of the shift, if you will, the journey of changing career fields and everything. I had
Mhm.
a lady who was on our pastor search team gave me a book to read called from Tony Evans called Detours, and
Hmm.
it speaks specifically on that that it wasn't that you failed at something. God just had a detour. He needed you to go
Mhm.
through. He needed you to take a different route to go to where you were going, and don't get hung up on the fact that you didn't make that you didn't make it where you were going this way and everything. So that book was pretty profound.
Wow.
Recommend anybody reading it.
Yeah. Detours by Tony Evans.
Yeah.
Man. Well, yeah. So I just want to thank you for coming on here and sharing your story with us. Thanks for really just talking about some things that I think there are people out there who need to hear this. Maybe people who have been called into ministry and just have not answered the call
Mhm.
for whatever reason. And then those who are wanting to maybe had a goal of graduating from college, but they're like, oh, I'm too old, right? You
Mhm.
graduated when you were 47. I got my last degree when I was 46. Was it 46? I don't know. I feel like I'm so much older than I am. But yeah, it's like going to school in your 40s. It's like this is not fun. But really reaching those goals that you set out, you have that feeling of accomplishment. That's like, oh man, finally. It feels so good to be done.
All right.
So anyway, yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. And I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream, but don't leave because I want to talk to you in the studio. And everybody else, we got up next. I'm working on the guest for next week. My planned guest for next week is dealing with a family emergency right now. So I don't know if he'll be available for next week, but rest assured, we will have somebody, even if it's just me, and then you get to see me again. But I am also finally recording with Brandon Burns. He's out in California and he's missed 2 times that he was scheduled to come on here and he missed. So we're recording tomorrow night and then I'll just post it as a bonus episode or post it for next week. But anyway, you guys have a good one and I'll see you next week. Peace.